crafty people, and welcome back to another beginner quilt block video. Today we're going to be working on another very traditional, very versatile beginner quilt block. Probably one of my favorites. It's called the log cabin. And I'll zoom in here so you can see it, where it begins and ends, because, here, let's do this block here. So this is the center, this. Basically, right here, this whole little corner block is a log cabin. And as you can see, it's really great to do lights and dark colors, and then basically just rearranging where the blocks are, you can create really interesting images and different effects. This is probably one of my favorite quilts I've ever done, and this was actually a beginner quilt, a class that I taught a couple of years ago, and it was to show how you can take a really simple block and then do some either really intricate quilting, some more basic free motion quilting, and then there's also straight line quilting in here as well, to really show off the block. And so my last beginner quilt block video, the granny square, was very popular, so I thought I would go ahead and show you the log cabin. So that's the traditional style, and then I do have some rectangular style log cabin quilt blocks that I've been kind of experimenting with, so I'm still kind of figuring out those. So let's go on over to the cutting table. Alrighty, so here we are at the cutting table. What I love most about the log cabin quilt block is it doesn't really require a whole lot of cutting. You're going to start off with a center square, and mine happens to measure 1.5 inches square. But again, with this block, it's so versatile, you could actually start off with the center square any size that you want it to be. Now, what you need to keep in mind is that your strips, the strips that you're going to be adding around to it, are also going to be the same width of the center square. So I'm doing 1.5 inches. That means that all of the strips that I'm going to add to it are also 1.5 inches wide, and the length of each strip is going to vary depending on what position it's in the block. So the first piece that you're going to add to your center square, whatever color you choose or whatever measurement, is also going to be a square as well. So my first two pieces were 1.5 inch squares. And what you do is you're going to turn it counterclockwise, as you see I'm doing here. And then you're going to add the new piece to the right hand side. Turn it counterclockwise, and then you're going to add your next piece. Now you can see here I'm trying to kind of keep my sort of color families in the same sections. That just really gives you a lot to work with color wise. As you saw in the quilt I showed you in the beginning of this video, you know, those all lights were on one side and all darks on the other side, and so it makes it a lot more fun to play around with positioning and layout of your quilt. I also really love using holiday fabrics for this quilt block. As you can see, this is a really great option for a red, white Christmas quilt. You could even do red, red and green, and then center square could be like a nice simple white square, and then you could do red and green as your different logs, essentially is what they're called, because it's a log cabin quilt. It's also great for, Halloween, for anything that has like high contrast color families. It's a really great block for that. And so all I'm doing is putting my pieces together. I'm always using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember, in quilting we always use a 1/4 inch. It's just the best to hold your pieces together without using up too much of your fabric. And so you get your first two squares together, and then what you do is you turn it counterclockwise, and then you add the next piece to the right hand side. Now I just trim mine up really quickly with a pair of scissors after I sew it on each time. You could definitely use a rotary cutter if you want to. I also don't take it to the ironing board every single time, mostly because I don't want to get up every single after every single piece. Now for the video, I'm definitely showing you each log one at a time, but this is a great project or a great block to do some chain piecing and batch sewing. So you could easily grab all your center squares, and then if you're making each block exactly the same, it would be really easy. If you're going to mix it up and make it very scrappy, also a very easy way to just, mix up the next strips and pull from that. I'm using some Christmas fabric because I just finished up a Christmas quilt. And yes, I am already doing Christmas sewing. If you actually want to get Christmas projects done in time for Christmas, then you need to start now. Just letting you know that right now. So you can see I was measuring it really quick to see how big it was. You could stop right there. You could easily make little teeny tiny log cabin blocks if you want to. It's easier to work with them the closer to being square they are. So there is a certain sort of like sweet spot. When you add this next log, obviously that's going to add another inch. An inch. Well, an inch and a quarter initially, and then once you sew it again, it'd be an inch. So that's something to keep in mind too, what size you want to make your center block. Because the bigger the center block is, then the wider the strips have to be, which can be a beneficial thing if you want to do less blocks to make a big quilt. You could even do an entire quilt top out of a log cabin block. So that's what makes it so versatile. You can go really small, you can go really big. You could do, every single log, every single cabin, the exact same color schemes, the exact same layout, or you can make it really scrappy and mix it up. So this is really nice for people who've been quilting for a while, or maybe you wanted to get into quilting and you bought all the fat quarters and you're like, now what do I do with all these fat quarters? I think this is a really great block to just cut up some fat quarters because it doesn't take a lot of fabric, as you can see. I mean, you really just need the strips just long enough to finish off your block. At the end of this video, show you that this block ends up being only about 6 inches square, and so the longest strip that you would need, is going to be 6.5 inches, maybe. So depending on how many little logs you want to add to it, you really don't need a whole lot of fabric. And again, we're always sewing our next piece on, doing our 1/4 inch seam. And then once we pull it off, pull it out from under the needle, we're going to turn it counterclockwise so that our sewn piece that we just did is on top. And then I'm just doing a quick little finger press. And you don't want to like yank the fabric as you're finger pressing. Right now my fingernails are kind of grown out. So it is really easy to just kind of take your fingers and just basically you're flattening the fabric to the seam. You're not necessarily pulling it or anything like that. Okay, so once you get it to about the size that you want, mine was just about 6 inches, go ahead and then you can take it to your iron and really just press it out. Get it nice and flat. And you can see some of the color blocking a little bit better here too. Then what you're going to do is you want to trim it up. And this definitely works a little bit easier if you have a square ruler, but this works. It's not too off actually. So what I do is I find the horizontal line on my ruler and I line it up with a horizontal seam on the block. And then what I do is I ever so slightly push it to the edge, right? And I want it as close to the edge without going over. And because I'm making sure that all my horizontal lines are, parallel, perfectly straight with the block, then when I trim it up, I know that it's going to be nice and even with everything else on the block. And sorry, it's a little bit shaky here. I was having to hold the camera at a different angle to show you this. And this is one of the other reasons why I like just finger pressing a little bit better. every time you pick up the block and go to the iron and iron it gives you more chances of sort of distorting your fabric. Whereas a quick little finger press is not gonna, as long as you're not pulling it and everything like that, and as long as you've prepped your fabric beforehand, it really just helps things lay flat, helps it not get distorted. And as you can see here, it's a little bit not perfectly square. I could trim off whatever side I wanted to create an even 6-inch block. That way when I sew it all together, it would finish up at about 5.5 inches. Yeah, so there you go. So there's a square block. That's a 3.5-inch one. So that would be earlier when I showed you, early in the block, I kind of did a measurement, and there was sort of that sweet spot where it was about 3 inches that I could have stopped adding logs and had a 3-inch quilt block. Here, this is a pre-cut strip from like a jelly roll. Those are also really great to work with on this project, obviously, because you're going to have them all a nice long length for you. But here she is, our beautiful little Christmas log cabin quilt block. And again, this is a really great one to play around with different colors, with high contrast. Keep it scrappy. I really like holiday ones. They just turn out really cute. And this is just a really great block to use up some scraps. So if you want to see some more quilty videos, more crafting videos, some more machine embroidery videos, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you soon. Have a crafty day.